Welcome back to our Christmas content advent calendar, where each and every day through to the 24th, we're bringing you a brand new video about all kinds of different things. Today, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Moody photography and how to inject some mood and some atmosphere into your photos. We're going to talk about portrait photography, and we're going to talk about landscape photography and how you can get that mood and atmosphere in there. So let's start off with portrait photography. Now, when I'm shooting portraits, you can go for different types of stuff, and I think it's okay to have your own style. So I think generally for me, my style is probably a little bit more colourful, a little bit brighter. I like nice lighting, but I like interesting lighting and a lot of colour and things like that. Whereas sometimes you want to go for like a more of a moody shot, where perhaps the absence of light is more important. Perhaps the feel of the photo is a little bit darker and gloomier. Now, there's a few different ways to achieve this. Some photographers go for the mood of the subject is what's going to affect the mood of the photo. And I can totally get that. You wouldn't want to have a moody photo where your subject is all smiles and happy and having a great time, because that might be a bit weird. Now, there are situations where actually maybe that would work. Maybe the contrast would be amazing, but for the most part, the mood of your subject is what's going to be reflected with the mood of the photo. That's going to be an important part of it. But for me, the most important part of creating a moody portrait is lighting. It's the way the lighting falls onto my subject. It's the way the lighting interacts with my subject. That's going to create the atmosphere and the mood of the photo that I'm creating. So for example, this photo here is super easy to take. It was just taken in this room on the sofa. I have a very shallow depth of field. I was using an f1.4 lens, so that's very, very nice. But it's very, very easy. I have my subject sat on the sofa using natural light, so she's just looking out the window and the natural light is coming through that window, so it's nice and diffused and then just falling onto her face. Now what I've done is I've exposed for the highlights, so that light on her face is exposed nicely, and then everything else that the light's not actually directly hitting starts to fall away into shadow. You get the kind of light rolling around the face, kind of just feathering round, but for the most part, it's falling into shadow, and that creates this very atmospheric and moody feel to the photo. So controlling your light in that way, whether you're using natural light through a window, whether you're using a light that you've set up, controlling how it's hitting your subject and then how you're exposing for it makes a big impact on the feel of the photo. And by exposing for the highlights, you can then bring everything else down into shadow, which just plays around with the contrast of the photo, because ultimately that's what's creating the atmosphere here. Another aspect that I've applied here is desaturation. So I've brought the saturation down a little bit. Now it helps that the sofa is actually grey and there's not much colour in the scene anyway. But even if there had been, I could have brought the saturation down a bit, and that would have helped to create this kind of atmosphere in the photo. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. You can just do a blanket saturation reduction, or you can go into something like the HSL tab that we've looked at in Lightroom before and go through each of the colours and desaturate them appropriately. So for example, blue, if you're outside and the sky is visible, then that's going to bring down the saturation in the sky. You might even want to desaturate a few different colours, but actually boost one. So for example, in the same photo, I've boosted the orange a little bit to give a really kind of specific colour feel to this photo, but it creates this kind of atmosphere to the photo. Now going back to light, this photo was taken in the forest, which I think is always a great spot to take portraits, because you can really play around, especially in the middle of the day, with how the light is coming through the trees and through the leaves onto your subject. So again, I've really exposed for the highlights in this photo. I've got the light kind of dappling through the leaves onto my subject as it's coming through there. And by exposing for that, everything else falls back into darkness. And this really emphasizes this kind of mood and this atmosphere in the shot. I really can't overemphasize enough how much light plays a massive part, well, in all types of photography really, but especially if you're trying to capture some mood and atmosphere, then by having this kind of lighting and exposing for it in this kind of way, you're really creating a certain look for your photo. Now let's talk a little bit about landscape photography. Now for me, this is always a little bit trickier to capture mood and atmosphere, because unlike portrait photography, where you've got one subject and you can really control how the light is affecting them, and you can really kind of control your background and stuff like that, with landscape photography, usually the whole scene is your subject. And even if you are focusing in on one smaller aspect of the landscape, it's still more difficult to control things like the lighting, things like how that's affecting the landscape. So you have to get a little bit more creative. For me, the biggest thing about capturing atmosphere and mood with landscape photography is heading out at the right time to actually shoot. Now, normally I recommend shooting around sort of sunrise or sunset, as you can get those golden tones. The light is very soft and just generally quite beautiful, and you're going to get usually the best possible conditions for photography. However, when you're trying to capture atmosphere and mood, that's not always the case. You can definitely get some great atmosphere at sunrise or sunset, specifically sunrise actually, where you might get that early morning mist as well. You might get the sun coming through the mist, but you might actually want to head out and shoot at some other times. And one of the biggest things for me when I'm trying to capture that moody atmospheric shot is shooting in slightly worse conditions. So for example, storm clouds can look great over like a nice wide vista where you've got storm clouds rolling over, you've got the rolling thunderclouds. That can really add a lot of atmosphere and kind of mood to your photo. And similarly, fog and mist, that can really add a lot as well. Now, with fog and mist, it's a little bit different because the visibility is generally quite seriously reduced. So you're going to want to focus in on one individual aspect. You're not going to get that wide vista landscape. You're going to have to focus in on one thing. So in fog and mist, you're going to want to pick where you're going to focus in on something. So for example, in this photo, I deliberately headed down to the river that I knew was going to be misty and foggy because it was misty and foggy everywhere. And I just sort of set up and I was waiting for something interesting to happen, to catch my eye. And it just so happened that while I was sat there, some Canadian geese just swam past and I was able to get this photo, which I was really happy with. It's nice and minimalist. So you've got the fog and the mist everywhere, so you can't really see anything except these geese swimming off into the distance. Now, of course, you can get some various photos while you're there waiting for something to happen, but sometimes it is just about patience. Unless you know of a specific thing that you can take a great photo of in the mist and the fog, sometimes it's about patience and waiting for something to happen. And then sticking on this theme of kind of worse conditions to shoot in, rain is also great for adding atmosphere and mood to your photo. You know, especially in the city, I love shooting in the rain because it's going to create wet surfaces for reflections. It just creates so much atmosphere, and the city is slightly different, especially when it gets darker and the lights start coming on. All those lights are suddenly reflected. You get people with umbrellas. It can just look so good. This photo, which is almost more street photography, was just completely by chance passing someone with an umbrella, street lights all around, but I'm really, really happy with it. And it really captures the mood and the atmosphere of the moment. With landscape, it really just is about looking out for those moments that you can capture this. So, stormy weather, rainy weather, fog and mist, anything that's going to add atmosphere to the scene. So those are our tips for capturing mood and atmosphere in your shots, whether it's portrait photography and you're controlling the light, controlling the saturation, stuff like that, but really honing in on how the light is affecting and interacting with your subject, or whether it's landscape photography and you're obviously not able to control the light so much, but you can still go out at the right time. It's about making the most of the right times to shoot, the right places to shoot, and really maximizing your chances of getting those great shots. Now, if you have any questions about anything, pop it down in the comments. I'd love to hear any of your tips as well. So if you've got any other tips that we didn't cover, pop them down there as well. So we really did just scratch the surface of kind of moody, atmospheric photography. I'll pop a full list of all the equipment used for the photos in the video down in the description so you can check that out as well. Don't forget to subscribe because we've got new content every single day up to the 24th. So loads of tutorials, loads of interesting stuff. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Give the video a like as well if you enjoyed it, because that always helps me out. I will see you tomorrow. And, woo, as always, thanks for watching.